We got the LinkedIn boss here, Rob Lally. Rob, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I mean, like, how's it going, everyone? I hope you enjoyed our last, chat together. I know we've had a bit of good feedback on it, particularly on some LinkedIn posts as well. Some people loved some of the things that we were spitting out over there. But if anyone has any questions for us when we're going through this, it's just pretty much a freestyle session of us dropping as many gems as possible, isn't it, Alok?
Absolutely, man. And I'm excited today. We're going to be talking about 10 productivity hacks that you can make in your life, in your business to A, be more efficient, B, burn out less frequently, C, be less overwhelmed. It's D, E, and F. We'll get into all that. But really excited to talk with you about this, Rob.
Yeah. And I think like this is something which most entrepreneurs at some point really, really struggle with is actually executing. Because, we can all lie in bed or go and get a shower and come up with good ideas, but really pushing it over the line and kind of managing yourself is so tough to do because it's, you have a lot of ego involved there as well. And actually like, yeah, that fear of failure might start to set in, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think for me personally, my whole life I've been like the do it all by myself kind. So it's been very difficult for me to learn, well, hey, I might need to allocate this out. I might need to have somebody else, like an assistant, do this for me, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think like it even starts outside of entrepreneurship. I remember the first time I ever went to a gym was when I was like 15 years old. And I remember I really wanted to go to the gym because I thought, if you get big muscles and you get attention, right? The girls like you. And what actually happened was I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, you know what? I'm too skinny to go to the gym. I need to work out at home first. I need to get the best gym top, the best gym shoes. 6 months later, I still haven't been to the gym, right?
Mm. So what is that? That's the perfection syndrome, and I can definitely say that I've suffered this myself. You buy the best gear, you buy the best stuff. Maybe it's you're afraid to reach out to somebody, so you just put it off, you put it off, you put it off, you put it off, right, Rob?
Yeah. Have you ever watched The Undercover Billionaire with Grant Cardone?
I've watched the first two. I actually bought the first two seasons. I've watched two episodes. I need to get back on that.
Yeah. So one of the things that you see, even if you don't take anything away from Undercover Billionaire, one of the things that you should take away is that like the level at what these guys operate and execute. They are idea straight to paper, idea straight to paper, whatever's happening. And you can see it particularly with Mr. 10X, Grant Cardone. He's straight out there. He's running everywhere. He's just like idea person. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to make it work. Oh, it's not working. On to something else. He doesn't care about perfection. He cares about making it work. And that's probably why his net worth is over $1 billion now.
I would love to talk about that. And for everybody that's watching and wondering, like, how do you make this happen? Let's break into this, Rob, and really unpack what is it that you need to do to be able to build that muscle of let go of perfection and focus in on execution.
So I think that's a great question. And first of all, what I'd say is exactly, I don't know whether you use this phrase deliberately, but I think it's so true. It is building a muscle, right? You can't just operate at, Grant's level on day one. It takes time. The perfectionism is the killer of business. And sure, it's great to have things right, but I think being able to step back and logically and rationally think to yourself, is what I'm doing, does it need this level of perfection, right? And somebody told me, because I'm a perfectionist, somebody told me once, which completely shifted things for me. I hired an accountability coach once. He said, you're a perfectionist, concentrate on submitting imperfect work, do it deliberately. to get yourself out of that cycle. What do you think about that?
So here's what I think. Most of us probably went through a traditional education system, and
Mm.
that shapes our psyche to focus on perfection. If you hand in a paper wrong, you only have to lose, right? You get a negative mark, you get a negative mark. So that is slowly training us to avoid any kind of imperfection for fear of losing marks. That's my thought.
That is so interesting. So you're saying pretty much like I like the traditional education system and our lives have been pretty much built on this foundation of we need to get it right.
Exactly. Exactly. So, as entrepreneurs going into entrepreneurship, maybe our parents weren't business people. We need to retrain our subconscious and our psyche to be good with this kind of feedback, right? We need to be learn to take feedback as good, and because this is data, right? This is data for us.
So how do we go about doing that? You know, say you're an entrepreneur, you sat watching this right now and you're struggling with kind of execution. How do we go about doing some of those things that you said?
So how do we retrain our psyche to view data as good? I think the main thing that you have to think about as an entrepreneur is that any feedback is good feedback, and the worst thing you can do is get crickets. That's number one. That's number one.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
So any feedback is good feedback because after all, so that actually kind of leads into my next point. I think like the two biggest, problems for entrepreneurs dealing with execution is one, they think they're executing hard enough, but they aren't. And two, they're executing hard enough, but they're moving in completely the wrong direction, which comes back to feedback as well, what you were talking about there.
I'm a rock climber, by the way, so I don't know if you guys know about rock climbing, if you've ever watched it, but when you're climbing something, the number one thing you want to focus on is just getting up, right? Just getting up. And when you start out rock climbing, you're very inefficient, right? And you just don't know the best way to put your hands, to put your feet. You're like scrambling all over the wall. But the main thing is, are you following the route? Are you going up? And, Rob, let's talk about, finding your trajectory. I think that's really, really important, right? How do you find your trajectory? And then figure out the rest as you gain more experience.
Mm. So how do you mean find your trajectory? Let's break that down.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's make a little route, right? Let's say you want to get to the top of that mountain, right?
Mhm.
You're setting off on your expedition. You're like, I want to get up there. Now, in order to get there, you need to first identify, okay, what are the obstacles? Where should I not go because that's dangerous? Maybe I'll get stuck there. Maybe that's a dead end. So the first thing is you want to map out your route, right? That's the first thing you want to do. The next thing you want to do is then plan how you're going to get there. Am I going to stop here? Am I going to take a break there? So that's what I mean by let's plan out like your trajectory.
Yeah, so I think that is, I think you can do that in a number of ways, right? So you can you can do some proper planning, but if you have no experience in the realm, you can get a mentor or get a coach or read a book which talks about the principles of what you're going to do. You know, I just made a YouTube video on this before, but one of the best books I've read, let me get it down from up here. So you can tell this is live, right? I've got books falling on my head. But it's this book right here. It's called Made in America by Sam Walton. And Sam Walton is the founder of Walmart. Now, whatever you think of Walmart, there is so much business advice in this book from a guy who wrote it on his deathbed about negotiating relationships, about resilience, consistently trying and complete execution, that some of these bits in your journey, if you're looking at like planning your route out, it's going to be made easier by just even picking up like, you know, a book if you haven't got the money for like mentorship or anything, or like coaching, right?
So let's go back to Grant Cardone, right? So we were talking about how do you get to a level like Grant Cardone? So we identified number one is you have to focus on execution. And maybe your footwork and your handwork, the day to day, won't be great.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can identify, right, the trajectory you want to go, and if you can really identify the strategic plan, right, and you can focus on executing on that, you're going to eventually be a lot more efficient versus if you don't have the right plan. And this is something I see a lot. You know, I work with clients who are working super, super hard. They're driving a lot of content, they're trying to reach out to people, they're DMing, all this, but they're not moving quickly enough in their business. And the biggest reason is they're following a broken plan, right? They're following a strategy that's maybe not suited for them. Maybe it's not really even the right market there. And so we'll get into all of this, but I just wanted to reground the conversation into how do you get to that level? How do you build that muscle like Grant Cardone? And the number one thing is, you know, Grant Cardone, whether he says it or not, he has a strategic vision in place and he's following and tracking that vision. He's not just taking action randomly, right?
Yeah, for sure. So he knows exactly like what he's going to be doing. He has these massive visions. He's all about, you know, the 10x rule. Whatever your vision is, times it by 10, aim for a higher lamppost. But I wanted to touch on something you actually said there. And you said strategy suited for them, you know, following a right strategy suited for them. And I think this is so, so important in entrepreneurship. We might be following, you know, maybe a particular guru, maybe a particular business coach, and they might be giving us advice. But does that advice suit you and the type of personality you are? So there's an amazing book here. And we were talking about this on one of our calls, weren't we, Alok? It's
Last
called,
one.
yeah, it's called Managing Oneself by, I don't know if you can see that, by Peter Drucker. And you only really have to read the first paragraph of this to get like the gold out of it. And the gold is you should always be working to your strengths. So if you're an analytical guy, you know, and that's generally what you like doing and where you get good results, you should like 10x yourself in the analytical category. Do the analytical things. I'm an extrovert. I love speaking with people. I love doing presentations, communicating. So I need to be on video. I need to be doing presentations, sharing stages, doing sales calls.
Yeah, Rob, you've got a great YouTube channel. I've been following it for a while and it's just amazing. You guys should definitely check out Rob's YouTube because he just goes in for like 45 minutes and talks about like one thing. It's freaking awesome. It's so good. Um, but definitely, you know, I'm a very introverted, like analytical research. I've grown up as a scientist, right? I studied microbiology and then I have a master's in human nutrition and I've done a lot of, you know, research studies, lab work, etc. So for me, like my strength is definitely strategic thinking, analytics, being behind the scenes, research, etc. So Rob, like for me, what would you, and maybe anybody that's watching, um, how could they find their strength? How could they obviously get the book maybe, right?
Yeah, well, one of the key things is that Peter Drucker says it's very, very hard to actually realistically know what you're good at because you'll think you'll know what you're good at, but realistically, only like you were saying before, only feedback can give you the real answer, right? So if you are, you know, if you look back at your life and you've got you know, maybe you have excelled in certain environments. Maybe you've excelled using particular skills, right? You seem to have got a strange like result for a particular skill that you were using. That is probably something that you're actually really good at. So what I'd say for you, Alok, because you've always gravitated to, every time I've spoke to you, you've been like, this is what and the keys in like the language, like this is what I've been working on, this is what I've been figuring out. And you can tell that that's how you are. So what I'd say is, how are you structuring your day at the moment? For those introverts out there who kind of want to
Yeah.
make it as good in business as you, how
Yeah.
can they do that?
So this is great question. And, I tend to be very, very introverted. I do not like posting on social media often. So one thing I've leveraged is relationships, right? So we talked about that in our last interview, in our last whatever freestyle. Leveraging relationships of naturally extroverted individuals. So my clients tend to be very extroverted. On the Enneagram, they're number 3. They're like, go out there, they can, say everything, but they tend to not really, have their own strategy like dialed in. So I can really help them dial in the perfect language of their landing pages, help them understand the markets they need to go after, help them do the research of their ideal clients. So I'm on the back end, and that's how I function best. And it's allowed me to 10x, 3x a lot of their revenues because I just can give them that little bit of insight, that strategy, and then they can go and act on it. So yeah, that's how I tend to operate as an introvert, Rob.
So that's really interesting. So let's break this down. So you will, like, the weakness, you will almost pair up with somebody where it's a strength, and then
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
that's amazing to do. I read this thing the other day, and it says like perfect relationships, like romantic relationships, work best where people are opposite Myers-Briggs.
Absolutely. That makes total sense. Um, and it's been once I figured that out, once I figured out, hey, I don't need to be like everybody else. I can figure out my own strategy. That's really where I came in to my own kind of strength. But let's talk about you, Rob. Like, let's talk about then the extrovert. How does the extrovert really, what is their strength? What is their weakness? What do they need to look out for? What opportunities should they seek?
Yeah. So for me, I honestly, and this is probably me lacking a little bit of the strategy side, right? It took me a long time to figure out like what I was good at. But what I did notice is, if I was spending an entire day digging through detail in whatever it was in my business, dealing with like the tedious things, I couldn't move very fast. I couldn't move very fast at all. And I think from what I can see with, and this comes down to managing oneself, from what I can see with people who are really good at business, every single one of them know how to move very fast and leverage their own time, but they leverage their own time by leveraging themselves. And I basically, it was actually Tai Lopez. I watched a video of Tai Lopez, and he was saying that essentially he noticed that his revenue for his businesses, and he's got millions and millions. He was saying his revenue for his businesses went significantly down when he wasn't being an extrovert and he was hidden in the back
Mm.
office.
That's a great insight. That's a really, really, really great insight. So maybe for everybody, point 2 is track your productivity, track your revenues, and see when you're doing XYZ, what are your results? Are your sales numbers up? Are your clients' results up? Etc., etc. And that, Rob, what you're saying is that could be a good insight into, what you're good at.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it takes a while to figure out, and sometimes it takes a while of looking at people who are above you and seeing who are similar to you and seeing how they did it. So, for instance, Sam Ovens, we both we both
Sam
know him, we
Ovens,
both follow his stuff. He's awesome, right?
super
Um,
awesome guy.
and he's all about focus, all about like you need to kind of trap out all the distractions and very, very, very much focus and live kind of very in a rigid way. Um, and I tried that for a while, and I just thought that was the only way, and it actually made me quite unhappy. and my results also started going down as well.
Hmm.
And it's not that it was bad advice. In fact, it's really, really good advice. And I can still take pinches of that. It's just if I was to do that, I wouldn't be managing myself to my personality. I'm more of a Ty Lopez more than a Sam Ovens. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I would
Fortunately, I don't have a
definitely.
Lamborghini.
Yeah, I could never talk about Lamborghinis. I'm like definitely more aligned with like the Sam Ovens side, but it's
Yeah.
interesting that I tend to gravitate, and this is another point for everybody. Look for mentors in your opposite, right? So I tend to not pay attention as much to like Sam Ovens because that's how my mind is set up. I'm seeking new information. And that's why I love partnering with, you, Rob, on this freestyle because you're so opposite. I can learn so much from you. And it's just I get to absorb. So the next point is if you're wondering, okay, how do I really leverage my personality type? Well, use it to your strength, but seek the opposite, right? Seek joint ventures, partnerships, relationships that play into your strengths, and then let the opposite take the weight of what you're not good at, and vice versa.
So let's break that down. How can a person actually start to find maybe people who are, who are that jigsaw piece in their life, kind of like how you did?
Great question. Awesome question. So, number one, the first thing I did for myself is I had to say, okay, I'm going to let go of the notion that there is the only way, there's the right way. That's the first thing I had to ask. A lot of coaches were talking about, you have to post content every day. Like Gary Vee's like, you got to post on 10 times a day, da 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 da. And I knew internally, I'm not going to be able to do that. So, first step, let go of the authority figure, right? If it's not aligning, let go. Then, what I did was I observed, right? This is definitely a more introverted characteristic. Probably something extroverts can benefit from doing maybe 15 minutes a day of. Just spend time observing, not interacting, and see, like, that person would be a great partner for me. And if you're an extrovert, introverts tend to not, go out and post a lot. They may post once a week, whereas you're posting 3 times a week. So it's going to be harder to notice maybe that introvert that's got a good complementary skill to you. But if you notice maybe one of their posts or a piece of content that's really phenomenal, you're like, oh my God, reach out to that person, be like, hey, start a conversation, right? So you have to understand what are your strengths. As an extrovert, you're more likely to be able to reach out to people, right, Rob?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, that's finding something that resonates with what you're about as well is amazing. As an extrovert, potentially trying to partner with an introvert, understand that maybe you have to lower your energy levels just a little bit, right? And you can't be all crazy all the time. Do you know what I mean? Because you just scare people off. But so one of the things on Undercover Billionaire I was watching, obviously Grant was like bam, 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 like a hammer smashing concrete all the time. And I was watching an interview, one of the guys he paired up with, and the guy turned around. Grant made this guy very successful, but this guy turned around and was like, you know what, I believed in him, but everyone around me was telling me you don't need to do business with this guy. He's too full on, which is obviously, good feedback for an extrovert as well. Way too full on.
Absolutely. I think introverts and extroverts can learn from each other. And I definitely do think that as an introvert, my greatest strength is to elevate the extrovert. Like, social media inherently is about being seen and being visible and kind of being that star. But the star is often, from my own experience and what my clients tell me, is like they often just don't have the strategy. They don't have the back end in place. They don't have many, many things that introverts are really good at. So, in terms of growing as an introvert, you have a lot of room to navigate on the inside, on the, not external kind of way. So reaching out to people behind the scenes and saying, hey, presenting really, really clear opportunities, strategic plans, etc. So I think that's the way.
Because what you do is so interesting, actually, particularly because I know you're coming from this mindset of, and you're probably one of the only people who are like in this space who are coming through with like this doctor's, scientist mindset and looking at entrepreneurship in this way, which, to be honest with you, is like a bit of a breath of fresh air, and actually like dissecting things and figuring out strategy. So tell us a little bit more about like how you go about figuring out strategy.
I'd love to. So, number one is you have to be a good observer, right? So, being a good observer means you have to turn off that extroverted personality for at least 10 minutes. So, instead of reaching out, instead of posting da da da, you have to be able to just sit and observe the world as it goes around you. And as an extrovert, I imagine it's very difficult to not engage. You see this cool opportunity, you want to, Rob, you can tell me, you probably want to like reach out or talk to somebody as an extrovert, but to build really, really good strategy, you have to be able to sit and avoid the temptation to engage with the world. That's what makes a good strategy is you can see things unbiased. So number one is to be able to just sit and observe. How do you do this, right? So this is something I cover a lot in my work with my clients, but I give them the tools like BuzzSumo, SEMrush, Answer the Public. All of these are great resources you can use to do that high level observation.
Mm. And I think first of all, like just coming up, having like a strategy, because I'm familiar with some of the tools that you use, BuzzSumo and that, and they're amazing to like, they're amazing to like get really granular on what you're looking for. But I think some people might actually miss this real important step of business, of understanding your niche, of understanding, your exact ideal client, and they might just bull run it and like run forward, right?
Yeah, and we've all made that mistake. I've made it too. One thing I've learned more as an introvert, observing this for the past 5 years, the number one step most entrepreneurs mess up on, even if they have made money, is identifying the most profitable, valuable problem that they can solve. Okay, this is what in my 5 step framework I call the identify piece, right? You want to identify, if you're like an oil driller, if you're drilling for oil and you've got like 5 pockets of oil, you naturally want to find the best piece of oil that you can get the most value of for the longest period of time. So if you want to do this and sustain over a long period of time, you want to make sure you're identifying the most profitable problem for your specific skill set, right? And that's kind of, what I do with my clients is I help them just get this one simple critical step right of let's figure out how we can position your skill set to tackle this most valuable problem and then generate cash flow for the longest period of time.
Friggin' love it, man. And I'm making notes on this when you're
Yeah,
talking
man.
as well.
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. So it's literally just like comes down to like what that one problem, right? That painful problem.
Yeah, and this is something I see glossed over in, many courses. I don't want to like specifically, say like this course was good or bad or whatever, but this is something I notice in my past 5 years of studying many courses, talking to a lot of gurus and whatever, is that this was a critical piece that was, it determines 90% of your business's long-term profitability, like what market you serve, right? What problem you solve. And most of the courses, because they were probably built by extroverts, are skipping this very, very fundamental piece. So I've literally flipped it on its head in my work. I spend probably 80% of my time working with my clients on this critical step because this is the foundations that build your entire business.
So front loading all that work so you can have exponential growth later down the line.
You got it. You got it.
Mm.
That's a beautiful line.
Yeah, a great guy in the entrepreneur space. He's a frigging veteran at it now, and I don't really hear many people talk about him. His name's Ramit Sethi,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Ramit Sethi is frigging awesome, man. He's like a real genius at running online businesses, and he also talks about this as well, which is, I mean, it's no coincidence he's probably worth over 100 million, right? So.
Dude, he was a monk for 10 years, and interestingly enough, when I was 18, I wanted to actually become a monk. I did not want to go to college. I wanted to go be a monk, and that was like my life aspiration is I want to find enlightenment and be a monk. So it's really interesting that if you've got this like monkish personality where you don't like to maybe, go out and mix around a lot, you like to kind of stick your roots in the ground, you probably have a lot of, growth potential, but you need to find the right partners to work with so you can help them grow. You can help them grow exponentially so that you yourself can reap some of that benefit.
And I think that's a great like point to sort of round off this first portion there is manage your own strengths, play to your strengths, and find the jigsaw pieces, kind of almost outsource the weaknesses, or even if you're not outsourcing them, find the strategic partners that can do those weaknesses, and think of things from a different angle.
There's like in nature, there is what we call symbiosis, right? And in symbiosis, the whole idea is that two organisms literally join forces because they can grow a lot bigger if they join forces than if they tried to do their own little thing individually. You'll see this all over nature, especially in trees and plants and stuff like that. So if you are the kind of person that you're extroverted, you can go, 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 but you get burnt out and then you kind of get lost, you should find one of those introverted people that are very like rooted into the ground. They're very like strategic, but maybe they don't have that like movement you do and they can't get around as fast as you do. So find those ideal symbiotic relationships, and it's going to help you grow much faster than if you're trying to do it all on your own.
Great point. And I think, using the example of Ty Lopez and Grant Cardone earlier, we know they have massive teams behind him. After Undercover Billionaire aired, people were asking how Grant Cardone found his time there. And he was like, it was a tough journey, but the toughest things were the little things, like
Mhm.
how to open a Word document. Right. And he does, and like it makes you realize that this dude who's worth over $1 billion doesn't even know really how to open a Word document, right, on his laptop, because he
Yeah.
has people managing that and doing it for him.
Yeah, and I think, that's something you don't see often. You just
No,
see the figure. And Ty Lopez, he is partnered with a doctor, I can't remember his name,
Alex Mayer.
Alex Mayer, right? Like Alex is probably more the introverted type, the builder, the strategist, the visionary, while Ty is the promoter. He gets the
Yeah.
crowd going. And that's who I've partnered with, and that's what's helped me grow and my partners grow is they tend to be the extroverted, they can get a crowd together, but oftentimes they just don't have the strategy in place. They don't have the same kind of attention to detail that I tend to have.
I love it, man. I love it. Let's talk about so we talked about like knowing where you're going with execution. Let's talk about actually executing hard enough. What do you think about like people who are into the entrepreneur space? Do you think they're working hard enough? Do you think like they maybe aren't heading in like the right direction in terms of like work ethic and things like this?
Well, I think you have to work, obviously, I don't like the word work hard. I think you should work smart. You should work
Mhm.
with enjoyment. You should actually enjoy what you're doing. Because if you're not producing the same level of results as if you are. It's no secret that if you really love what you do, people feed off of that and they
Mm.
naturally get a high because you're freaking excited talking about whatever that topic is. People feed off that energy. So it's not about working hard, but working with focus, working with compounding interest. And this is really what I want to touch on. You, as an entrepreneur, are not going to be able to see significant results in a day, a month, or even a year, right? You, as an entrepreneur, if you're watching this, you're probably the kind of entrepreneur that is not going to be satisfied with six figures or even seven figures. You probably want to hit eight or nine figures if you're watching this. So if you want to see that long-term growth of your company, if you want to be able to eventually hand off your company to a CEO and just pull in millions of dollars sitting on a beach type of thing, you have to build that with consistency, right? So it comes back to compounding interest on your time. And I believe, and Rob, I want to get your thoughts on this, is you have to find that gift you have and you have to compound it over and over and over and over every single day and not let it go.
Yeah. Well, 100%. Like, I think like if a person comes into this game thinking, I want to make a bit of quick money, you're going to learn pretty quickly that you're going to be disappointed, right? Or that like, oh, I just want to live my life and, go and retire, right? Make my business really successful and then go and retire. Like, it's all about like the long-term thing. And I think you touched on it where you were talking about, enjoying what you're doing. And you have to enjoy what you're doing in this game because it's the only way that you will consistently be able to give effort, and the results that you get in a year's time potentially might be from the actions you've taken today. And I was reading this amazing book. It's by Jeb Blunt. It's called Fanatical Prospecting.
Hmm.
And Fanatical Prospect is probably one of the best prospecting books ever written. And prospecting, obviously, if you don't use that term, it's about hunting for potential clients all the time. So this guy said, like, generally with a person's pipeline in sales, they will see the sales from the actions they took 3 months ago. And he says, when you don't get any sales today, it's because something 3 months ago you weren't doing the actions or something wasn't going right.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's something I focus on with my clients and my marketing is I'm not trying to make a sale happen today or next week or even this month, right?
Yeah.
In order to really be effective with your marketing, and when I say effective, I mean you have the greatest amount of customer lifetime value.
Mm-hmm.
You can only do that by creating a moment of significant insight at every step of your marketing, right? And a big mistake I see in the six-figure coaching community is they're going for the sale way too quickly without building any type of engagement, any trust, any likability, any insight really in their buyer, in their audience, in their ideal clients, right? So I made a tweet today. I said, how can you expect somebody to buy from you if you can't even get them to talk to you? And I think that's a critical point to, discuss. And Rob, your thing is all about, building relationships. Would you say it's correct that in order for somebody to buy from you, you first have to get them to pay attention to you?
Oh, for sure. Like, particularly in today's age where social media is so busy, with the boom of entrepreneurs that have come in and, you know, um, your dopamine's completely fried in your brain because you've seen so many content posts all promising you these things. And you have to really learn how to kind of try and stand out from this to actually, appear like good to your prospects. And the only real way you can do that is by being that consistent person, by being that persistent person. And people don't just, here's what I've found, people don't just get interested in you straight away, right? So this is a great example. I signed a client the other day, and I looked at our conversation history on LinkedIn, because that's where I do all my work. And our conversation history was, he added me and was like, been following your content, thought it's really good, thanks. And I sent him a message asking what he does. And he didn't really reply to it. He just said, oh, thanks for the video. Good, hope to keep in touch. That was the end of the conversation. 3 months later, this dude reached out to me from a post I made on LinkedIn and is like, let's do business. And I'm like, who are you? Because I've forgotten by this point, right? But it's the compound effect and getting that attention. And he's obviously been following me for 3 months, and I've just not known about it, right?
Yeah, I'm working on a framework right now that is going to elucidate how to think about marketing. Because the big problem I see, right, as we touched on, is that coaches in the six-figure range are going for the sale way, way too quickly. And the missing component in their strategy is time. They're not considering that people just need freaking time to absorb and digest your content. They need time to absorb and digest who you are as a person before they'll ever be ready to consider you as a potential someone to hire or pay money to, or bring onto the team. There is this weird thing humans do where they just need time and cycles of the sun going around the earth. And if you can understand this one simple but very significant piece, your whole strategy to acquiring clients is going to change very dramatically. And you're not going to see these, people as walking, sales. You'll start to see them as people, as buyers that are on a journey to find some kind of insight into their life, to level up. It becomes so much more fun at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And, I always give the example of like dating, right? And, if you walked into a bar, and you saw a guy or a gal who, you found attractive, and you walked up to them and you were like, my name's, Mark, will you marry me? They'd be like, they'd probably laugh in your face, right?
Yeah.
And they tell you to get out of there. Or they tell you they have a boyfriend or they have a girlfriend or whatever, just to end the conversation.
Yeah.
But the people who like build it up over time, knowing that life is long and so is business, they're the people who are going to get to know those people. And, the approach is going to be better because you've taken away this sense of urgency where you just need to close that sale, and you're letting people get to know you.
Yeah. And here's the thing is, if you're watching this and you're like, whoa, like Robbie, Alok, you guys are saying great stuff, but like, how do I do this? Well, I want to break it down because I want everybody to get something actionable, a very small piece of action that they can take action on. And number one is you want to outline, well, what is the first insight? What is the first insight when my potential client first enters my ecosystem, right here, right? Where are they? What do they perceive their problem to be? And what's the first critical insight they need to make? Okay, so this is your action item if you're watching this. If you're wondering, how can I improve my marketing to increase my conversion rates, improve my lifetime value, make it easier for me to sell and grow and scale? Just do this one thing. Identify what is my buyer's main problem, where are they stuck, and what's that first critical insight that they need to make so that I can acquire their interest, not their money, right? That's not what we're trying to do. Just make that one shift. What's that first critical insight that they need to make?
I love it. So that's kind of like looking outward, isn't it? Onto, onto like your ideal clients, onto your who you're identifying as your ideal clients, and looking at that single pain point. I have something for people internally as well, and this has come from people in coaching people on like a strategy on LinkedIn. So I had this is a great example. I'm not naming any names, but I had a guy came to me and he was like, I'm so burnt out. He was like, I am just trying to get leads from LinkedIn. He was like, I've been trying. I'm just so burnt out. Nothing's working. Can you help me? So I was like, yeah, sure. No worries. The first few weeks into our relationship, I got him to track his time and actually mark down on each half an hour of his time or an hour what he was doing and get him to send it to me. And after like a week, we had our coaching session together, and I brought up this, which I've now color coded. He had it on like an Excel sheet and I color coded it. And I said, so you're burnt out and your problem is you can't get any clients from LinkedIn. And he was like, yep. And I was like, and you're trying all the time to get clients from LinkedIn. And he was like, yep. It's like, that's the one thing that's not working at the moment. And I said, so why is it that only 30 minutes in an entire week have you just spent prospecting on LinkedIn? When all the rest of this stuff, he was learning stuff about a digital marketing agency, doing all these other things, thinking about content. And I was just like, you need to track that time and realize that you aren't acting on the thing which you need the most. You aren't prospecting just enough on LinkedIn. Now, I'm not a person who says you should be prospecting all the time, but what I'm saying is this person wasn't doing it at all, really.
Yeah, one insight I just made, and this may be right or wrong, but he might be an introvert. Like he might be more of a naturally introverted type of person who they don't like to go, and this is the biggest thing as an introvert. If you want to succeed in business, you probably don't like reaching out to people, but that is one of the things you just have to figure out how your own style of reaching out to people is. And maybe like, you're prospecting, it's not going to be like, hey, how are you doing? Like, how's business going type of thing. Maybe you won't be as direct. Maybe, and this is what I do, is in my style of outreach, I will try to give massive insights as early in the conversation as possible. Because as an introvert, your biggest strength is seeing things that extroverts probably are missing. So if you can create that one little insight and let that, time and that insight compound on itself, and you do that every day, this is like the fundamental of marketing, right? What's that one critical insight that your ideal client needs to make to solve their biggest problem? If you can just do that, focus on that, makes prospecting a lot easier, especially for introverts.
Yeah, I think you made some great points there. He was actually an introvert, but I'd say, and Jeb Blunt talks about this in his book, Fanatical Prospecting. I'm an extrovert myself, and guess what? I hate prospecting as well. I'm like, oh, I've got to do this. I've conditioned myself to kind of enjoy the process, but I think like the bigger problem was that he wasn't being honest with himself. He genuinely thought that he was trying, like he was going as hard as he could in this direction, but the data showed he actually wasn't at all anywhere near it, right? And I don't know if anyone's ever read the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Great book. And he was basically from a really unmotivated person to like a Navy SEAL. And David Goggins says, like, when you think you have reached your absolute limits and like you cannot go any further, you are generally at 40% of your maximum.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that, right? And it's so like apt because we're talking about prospecting. It's like, oh man, I gotta prospect, but I wonder how can we like shift this, because I feel like there's other ways to prospect. I think nowadays I do probably like zero, direct outreach at all, but that's a muscle I have to build. Now I'm more focused on, like this, creating content with you, Rob, working with my JV partners, helping them grow. Is prospecting something you just have to do, or is it something you can, I would love to know, can we do this in a more intelligent way? Is there a way we can make this possibly easier for ourselves, or is this just something that's going to be destined to suck?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think like I'm the same as you. I've kind of stepped back from it a little bit. I let my content kind of do the talking. I'm doing all the sorts of other things now. But it depends where you are in your business. And like if you're starting out, let's just say worst case scenario, you're starting out, you don't like talking to people, right? But you need that business. It's just one of those things that, one of those like doing your taxes at the end of the year where you've left all your taxes. It's one of those things that you're just going to have to do, right? And it might suck a little bit, but I think the intelligent way of doing it is, first of all, like you said here, identify the client, identify the very specific painful thing, and look to the strategy, what's needed to solve that. That's how you can get really intelligent with it, first of all. Second most intelligent thing, you can monitor your own prospecting efforts, monitor your performance as well, because most of the time you aren't doing it as much as you think you're doing it, right?
I love that. And, um, you know, maybe like a time tracker would be good,
Yeah.
maybe a schedule. What I've been in the practice of doing is writing out my top priorities for the day. So I'll write in a notebook, and this is a productivity hack, right? For everybody that's watching and tuning into this, how can you improve your results in whatever you do, in your business, in your personal life? Is write down everything you think you need to do and then look at it on a piece of paper and then circle the top 5% of things you actually need to do and let go of that bottom 20, 30, even 50%, because most of the time you're gonna be able to generate better sales, more results if you just focus on those top 5%, the real priorities, right? And let go of the bottom 20, 30, 50%. The bias is, though, as humans, we want to get everything. We think if we do everything, that's going to be the way. But actually, we have to flip our bias to letting go of more things and focusing on the true priorities.
Yeah, I get it. And, a good book that talks about a similar principle is The One Thing by Gary Keller, who founded Keller Williams. And it's like now worth like $2 billion, the real estate company. And he talks about when you are setting priorities for the day, what's the one thing that you can do today or this week that by doing it, everything else becomes unnecessary or easier to do? Do you
I
know?
love that. I love that, right? So, like, for example, if you could just focus on prospecting and you think you need to build a website and do this and do that,
Mm.
but let's say this one prospect brings you $1 million in, what would that do for you? Hey, you could outsource everything on the bottom 50, 60%, not even worry about it, and that one thing you did generated all the cash flow you need to outsource and eliminate from your plate that bottom 60%. So now you can do that again and again and again and again.
Exactly. And, I was speaking to this person recently and they were like, you know what? They were like, I'm trying to post to all these platforms. They were speaking to me about LinkedIn, but they were like, I'm trying to post to Instagram all the time. And like, I've got to get the videos right and all this. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. So why is it important to post to Instagram? And they were like, well, people might be watching me. I'm just trying to open up as many revenues as possible. I was like, how many followers do you have? They were like 50,000. I was like, how many people are actually buying from those 50,000? They were like 0. I was like, stop posting to Instagram. They've been posting for 2 years, and that's the one thing that they could do. Going back to your elimination there, I mean, like nobody was buying, right? Like it's not like they had a small audience; they had 50,000
I mean,
to eliminate.
50,000 is good. Possibly, like, what I would think is like, wow, if you have 50,000, why is nobody buying? I would probably
Yeah, yeah,
say, well, obviously, probably put a better offer out there.
yeah.
Put something that is relevant, figure out, hey, what is this demographic of my followers? What are their interests? What's their income? And what could I position in front of them that would make an absolute no-brainer buy, an offer that
Mhm.
sells itself? And just put that thing out there. Don't worry about what you want to create. Just put the thing they want to buy and make it awesome. And
Mm.
I would bet you, if you could do that, you would make some sales. I would
Mm,
bet
it's
you.
interesting. I've never, I've only just, as you know, I've only just joined Instagram. I think I've got like 4 followers,
I
including
followed you.
yourself.
I
Uh,
followed you.
you know, the funniest thing ever happened. So my girlfriend set up the Instagram account. She was like, "Oh, I'll set it up for you." I was like, "I haven't got time for that." I was like, "If I'm going to set it up, you've got to manage it, right?" And so she set it up. She included one photo of me, right? And there was like nothing. I hadn't linked it anywhere. It was about 3 hours old. And she said, "Do you know this person?" She brought me a phone and she was like, "Do you know this person?" I was like, "No." And she was like, "Some person has found you from YouTube within 3 hours of like of like setting up your Instagram account. He's your only follower, and he's reached out to you saying, 'Hey, your content's great. We should jump on a call.'" I'm like, "What the? Like, what are the odds of that?" I was just, it's insane, right? Like, how did a person find me?
It's crazy. That similar thing happened to me. I put my 10K for free offer up. There's this one lady, she just like absolutely loved every email, every piece of content, was just on a tear absorbing all of my content. She somehow found my YouTube channel and she was like she subscribed to it. So I think the thing is, if people resonate like with who you are, like as a human, they will like hunt down and track and
Yeah,
find every little thing you've created. So, like we were talking about, the actions you do every day, finding that strength, those compound, and maybe a year down the road, maybe 2 years down the road, those things will begin to pay off, right? So, never discredit what you're doing today, as long as coming back to our main point, which is you need to find your trajectory. What's that path that you want to go down? And, stick to it, right?
yeah, 100%. The clients will hunt you out if they like what you do, and it's so weird because half the time you don't even know these people are following you, right?
Right.
And then like um I had this lady, and I joke about this with like all my clients and when I'm talking about content. I had this lady, I'd sent her a message, connected with her on LinkedIn, sent her a message, and sent her another message, like sent her like a hello connection request message, and sent her another message after that. Nothing, didn't hear anything back from her.
Hmm.
She viewed my message, she ignored me. 6 months later, she comes into my 6 or 8 months later, she just comes into my inbox one day and she's like, "Hi Rob, let's do this." I'm like, who are you? Who are you? I didn't even know who she was. I was like, can I help you?
Yo,
Um,
guys, so if you want to know how to make this happen for yourself, I would suggest you reach out to Rob. He's a LinkedIn expert. Like, definitely check his stuff out because, you know, there's probably people watching this that are like, how the hell is Rob doing this? How is he getting people that are, just reaching out and ready to buy? And it's no secret, it's your content, like your strategic marketing is
yeah.
getting these people ready in the mood to buy from you. So I would suggest, guys, reach out to Rob if you at all have any interest in learning his secrets and really getting guidance from him. Phenomenal guy, right? So I just want to say it's so, so important that when you find someone that you really, really, really resonate with, and like their shit is just hitting every button, and you're like, oh my god, I need more of this. Do not hesitate to reach out because if these guys are legit, they will help you get to that next level. They will not try to shove something down your throat. So definitely check out Rob's YouTube, hit him up on LinkedIn, etc., etc.
Yeah, sure, man. And I know we're doing a lot of stuff together at the moment. We're gonna the aim is really just to appear everywhere, isn't it? Let's
Right.
together.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
let's, let's take over.
Take over. I mean, you know, this is like good marketing when you are focused on the customer and understand what they need to hear to get that next insight. It's not about you. It's not about selling your, showing, oh, I made this much revenue or whatever. It's about getting them to the next level of wherever they need to be, right? And the bigger we get, the more we can expand and expand and expand and help more and more and more people. So yeah, it's really important, I believe, to talk about, not only like what you need to do as an entrepreneur, but also give that good advice that we probably got ourselves of like, if you guys need help, like reach out to people, get help from people, because that is, if it's aligned, if it feels good, it's the fastest way to grow. And I'm always, always, always looking for people that just know more than me and I totally align with them. I'm always looking out for that.
Mm. And I think that's the way to do it, isn't it? Like be humble in your approach. There's things that I've even on this call right here, I've learned from you. I'm like, that's a pretty good idea, that is. And for the people who've watching as well, we kind of started out as this productivity and execution, almost just workshop, just to give so much value to you guys. And we said 10 at the start, but I think we've probably gave at least 15, Alok.
Yeah, 10's always a good number because it keeps you focused. And you guys, by the way, if you don't know, I made a little, what is it called? A little headline hack sheet type of thing. So I wrote out 10 headlines and I was studying, what was it that was really driving the best engagement for spiritual coaches. And in my research, one thing I found is by far the number headlines significantly outperform all the other headlines. The how to, the why, and the number headlines are the top three best performing headlines. So if you're ever wondering, like, how do I create a good engagement? How do I increase my numbers? Focus on the why, the how to, and the numbered headlines. 10 typically does the best.
No, that's really interesting. Well, I'll be sure to grab that cheat sheet from you as well, man. I'll be signing up to your email list or however I get that.
Yeah, it's on the email list. I'm not going to be handing it out again. I made an announcement a week or two ago. So, you know, I don't like to make a lot of work for myself, right? So I say like, hey, if you want this, get it now because I'm not going to release it again. And when I do release it again, it's going to be a while. So I want to make sure people are not adding work to me. So,
Mm.
Rob, I'm sorry, bud. You're a friend of mine, so I might give it to you. But for everybody else, pay attention to, what the next thing that's coming out. Because there's coaches out there that are seriously, seriously dropping value. But they're not going to go out of their way to like accommodate you. And I'm one of those people. I'll spend a lot of time putting work into the material giving you value. But if you are not willing to make that like little bit of effort to get it, sorry, you're gonna be gone. I'm gonna move to the next person.
Yeah, it's a good point as well, because I think, you look at anybody on the Forbes list, you even look at like who we were talking about earlier, Sam Ovens, Grant Cardone, Ty Lopez. These guys are decisive, and there's a key trait in being decisive. And one of the things that you need to be decisive on, if you're watching this video, is being decisive on taking action and improving yourself. So if you see something that you think can help, don't wait, don't hang around. The person I waited on Bitcoin, right, in 2010. Right. And I actually saw it in like 2011. I think it got advertised to me. The money I could have put in then was probably about £100 worth. I would have made $1 million from that. Right. So, like time is of essence, and it's important that you be decisive on actually taking action.
Yeah. If you see it, right, prerequisites, I think this is important to talk about because of the nature of our industry. It can be kind of shady at times,
Mm.
but what should you look out for? If you feel the resonance, if you feel that connection, if you just know, there may be fear. Obviously, there's always going to be fear in going to that next level. When I'm climbing, yeah, I could have a great time, but there's always going to be that latent fear of, oh, what if I slip or whatever. but you can't let that get in the way of your growth, right? So if you feel the connection, if you feel the resonance, take the action, right? There's always going to be risk, especially as an entrepreneur. You're taking on more risk than the average person. That's the nature of it.
Yeah.
But if you feel the resonance, if you feel the connection, if you feel the alignment, if you feel authenticity, take the step, because you're hurting yourself more by staying in the, not doing anything in the same, I call it the negative position, right? If you just stay stuck on the ground and you're like, oh, I don't want to move because it's scary, you're never going to get anywhere, right? The only possibility you have for growth is if you take this step. So I think that's a great place to wrap it up, Rob.
Yeah.
Talking about decisiveness. Cool, guys. Thanks for joining us. Rob, do you have any words of wisdom to share before we jump off?
No words of wisdom. I'm all out of wisdom right now, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And yeah, me and Alok are going to be doing this each week, or at least trying to, and sort of sharing content from it. But it's literally designed around you guys, designed around like your pain points, just to give pure value out of there. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys. Yes, we'll be doing these on Wednesdays. Also, we're going to be sharing this content out. Please feel free to reach out to us, and we look forward to seeing you all very soon. Take care.
Take care.